Hey guys, it's Gentry with Razorback Technology here for another install video. This time we've got a 2022 RZR Pro R in our shop. We get a lot of questions, calls, emails about where to install the sensor on this machine now that the clutch housing has changed. So we'll show you that and then where we ran the wiring. This is the first time we've installed one of these on this machine, so this is how we did it, and it worked out really well for us. So yeah, we'll take things apart and show you how you get that done. Okay, first step is to take out the seats, and on these RZRs, all it is a little lever down at the bottom that releases a latch on the back, and it should lift, lean forward, and you should be able to lift it out. So just like that, and this will just come out just like that. Alright guys, now that we have the seats out, we need to take this back panel off, and it actually is in two pieces. You've got this top piece here and then this bottom piece, and this bottom piece is actually connected to a little bit of your center console, so this will all remove in one piece. But how you get this out is on the top piece you just have these two quick disconnects on each side, so you can take those off, and then that will pull right out. And then the bottom you have another quick disconnect over here and over here, and you actually have to lift this up, and there's two quick disconnects right here, and then this whole, like I said, this whole bottom piece and this console will lift out, and then that'll expose the clutch housing for you. Now that we have the seats out and the back panel, it exposes the clutch housing. So what you're going to need to do, the clutch housing does have some quick disconnects already, but these 4 bolts, or 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's one right here, 5 need to come off, and then you've got these quick disconnects along the bottom that need to come off. And then also take this hose out, and that'll expose your clutch housing, and then we can take a look at where we installed the sensor. Okay, once you get the cover off, now what you'll need to do is get your belt off, because you don't want to be drilling holes in your clutch housing with your belt still on, so you don't want to damage that. So how you do that in this RZR is it actually comes with this little tool here, just right here, that you just pop out and you insert it right into there and screw that in. It'll push in that spring for you and loosen up the belt. Okay, now we're ready to mount the sensor. So what we had done is we kind of eyeballed on top of the belt where the sensor would go, and we drilled a little hole, little tiny hole, and putting that drill bit down in that hole, and that's dead center there. So we'll remove the belt, and we'll actually use the step drill to drill from underneath, and we'll open that up to about 1/2 inch and go ahead and mount the sensor. Okay, we're gonna now connect the sensor to the harness, because there's a notch in here that needs to be connected a certain way, so that way when you mount your sensor, the orientation of this 90-degree is right. So we'll go ahead and connect this. All right. And this only needs to be finger tight. It doesn't need to be tightened down with a wrench or anything like that. So we'll put that into that hole that we opened up, and then we'll put the other jam nut on the underside. And we'll end up putting some blue Loctite on this just so that this doesn't vibrate loose. But I wanted to show you how many threads you should have exposed on the underside. So after the jam nut, there really should only be a couple, 2 to 3 threads exposed on the underside. And that should be it. So we'll put we'll put some Loctite on that. We'll even put some silicone on the top side here, and that's how you install the sensor. Alright, let's show you how to mount the gauge cluster mount to the stock gauge cluster. So I've already taken these bolts out, but just wanted to show you, the easiest way is to take these 4 bolts out right here, 2 on the left and 2 on the right, and then disconnect this little connector right here, and this whole thing will pop right off. So you'll just have to keep track of these bolts here. They're 10 millimeter, so just get a 10 millimeter socket and remove those 4 bolts, and it'll come out just like that. And then I'll show you how the mount attaches. So now that we have the gauge cluster off, we have access to these 3 bolts on the back side of the gauge cluster. And all we need to do is, depending on which mount you're mounting, we've got a left hand side and a right hand side. You'll always need to remove this top bolt, but depending on which side you do, you'll need to remove either the left or the right one. In this case, we are mounting the left hand bracket, so it's going to be going on like this, and the brackets come with some hardware, and this is what the hardware looks like. And we do get a lot of questions about these, so we'll explain our reasoning behind these. So these bolts are going to have some spacers. The one on the left and the right side is going to be this small bolt, and you're going to have this spacer that will go on there. And it actually goes on there, and then the mount, and then the bolt. And then this one can be a little bit confusing. We've got a long spacer, and it's actually cut at an angle. So one of these spacers are going to go on the inside, and then this spacer is actually going to go on the other side of the mount. And once we install it, it'll make sense the way that it looks. But because this mount has a little bit of an angle on it, in order for it to sit flush, it's going to need that angled spacer. So go ahead and take these bolts out. Okay, so if I didn't explain this well enough, this is what it's supposed to look like. So you've got that smaller angled spacer on the outside, and then the larger spacer on the inside. And then on the other side, you've got that spacer on the inside as well. So that way this will, like I said, sit flush once it gets down in there, because you've got these grooves in the back of that gauge cluster. And these are 5 millimeter hex key size, so, and then that'll just go right in down like that, and then you'll tighten them up. So we went ahead and tightened these down, so that's what that should look like. And this should be pretty much one with your stock gauge cluster. So, and then we'll go ahead and install it back on the machine. Alright, so we have the mount secured to the gauge cluster, and we also have that secured and the gauge cluster plugged back in. And so then we'll go ahead and mount the gauge. You can sit in the cockpit and make sure that it's nice and straight. But so I wanted to show you how we ended up securing these harnesses for the gauge after we mounted the gauge up here on the cluster. So, because we were initially thinking that maybe we'd pop a hole and bring the harnesses back here with a little gasket around it, but this actually turned out really good. We just zip tied the harnesses to this mounting bracket right here. So these are nice and tight. These aren't going to be bouncing around anywhere, and you can pull this all the way up, and it's not going to pinch the wires because there's plenty of clearance right here. So that to us was the best option there. You can obviously go whichever direction that you want. And then so we've mounted the gauge, and then we've also mounted the sensor as well. So now what we'll do is we'll run all the wires, or we'll secure all the wires, but I wanted to show you where we ended up running everything. So the power, obviously the power was up in here, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But what we ended up doing is we went down the side here. So this is the sensor harness, and this is that fan cable. We're just going to run it down the same direction as where the sensor harness is going, because that's going to be the direction of where that fan would be installed. So in order to access this, though, you do have to take this whole fender off, which is not that difficult. It's just a lot of bolts or screws that you have to take out. And then we basically just ran this through this tunnel here, and then you might be able to see here there's some little tunnel, I guess, things that we ended up putting the harness through. And then again, we'll zip tie all these so they're nice and tight, but ran it through there and then just pushed it underneath the seat, and then see it over on this side. We pulled it up and around, just like that. So, but now we have both sides connected. We'll go ahead and tie up any loose ends, similar to something like this. Just coil it up and then start zip tying everything together and start putting everything back together. We also ended up cutting a hole out for our rocker switch, since this machine already had all these rocker switches taken. And so what this is, if you don't have the LED option on your switch, then don't worry about this second wire. But this is the this second gray wire is for the switch cable. So this is part of that power harness. There's not power coming to, well, not 12 volts anyways, coming through this, but this is the way that the gauge changes the brightness of your LED and your backlight. So we'll connect that. We'll trim these wires, of course, and then we'll connect the LED to the switch. So, and here's the instructions on the switch. So the number 8 terminal is your positive, number 7 is your negative. Again, that's only if you have the LED option. And then number 2 and 3 are just for the dimmer. And those are reverse polarity, so that's these two right here. It doesn't matter which wire or which color wire you connect there, but these top ones it will, again, if you have the LED option. So we'll go ahead and get everything connected, zip tied nice and tight, and then we'll start putting everything back together. Okay, so we're also going to install one of these block terminal connectors. This will make it easy for us to just plug in and then connect the gauge to power. These 3 wires, what they are is this is your positive and this is your ground. This yellow one is your accessory wire, your key on power. So we're actually going to connect the positive power from the gauge to this one and then ground. So let's show you where that is. You open up this little glove box. I'm just going to put this in here to keep this open. And then you just lift on both sides and pull this out. Actually, we need to pull this out first. Okay. Get that out of the way. And then if you can see down in here, these are the plugs, and it looks like all of them are used except this one. So, except that one right there on the very end, left side. So I'm just going to pull this out. And this just has a little clip on the side here that you just pull up, and that should pull right out. And then this, and we're not going to plug this in yet because we're going to connect probably the power first, but that'll just plug right in right into that spot over there. So I wanted to show you how we ended up connecting the LEDs to that switch. So because all of those pulse bar connectors are taken, we only had one available, and we used that for the gauge. So what we ended up doing was tying the LED switch into that as well. Now again, if you don't have the LED switch, this isn't anything that you have to worry about, but just wanted to show those that may have that LED option, how we ended up powering that LED. So we just tied it right into the key on power, same as with our gauge, so that they'll light up at the same time when you key on your machine. So what I would also recommend doing before buttoning everything up is just making sure that everything works properly. We've got our switch installed, the gauge installed, so let's go ahead and key on. The LED is turning on and it's working, it's changing the brightness for us, and the gauge is reading the temperature of that belt. So everything's working properly, so we'll go ahead and finish buttoning everything up.